If I may, do you have a copy of what's in our packet?
I do.
I just noticed something, a typo. You just went through the implementation plan and the objectives. Page 33 of the copy in our packet does not have objective 3 in it.
Oh, those were actually described within each of the, so the objective 3 were the concept designs.
This is in the list on page 33.
No, there's just not an objective 3.
It's 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
3 got dropped somehow, so.
Yeah, it ended up in section 4 of the document, and we can certainly add that in. We picked up with the concept designs, and then these were the remaining. So if you read the introduction, it discusses under 5.1. It describes section 3 of this document, outlines 6 objectives.
Right.
8 conceptual sites that make up phase 2 of this project described in number 4 of this document fulfill objective 3. That's why it is not in that list. We can certainly add that back in, but those were just discussed in the preceding 5 or 6 pages to that page. So those were the remaining items.
So if someone else doesn't think they're missing something,
We can
you might
certainly do
want to either put it in or put objective 3 discussed
See above.
previously.
Sure.
Whatever.
Sure,
Thank you.
we can do that. Okay, so as I mentioned, the steering committee, as well as identifying the 8 individual sites, did focus on prioritizing those sites, or their recommended prioritization to the City Council. The first priority that was identified was the North Entryway enhancement. That was number 1. The second was the North Couplet enhancement, because it also helped and reinforced the Council's goal to expand the perceived downtown area. The third priority was the South Entryway, so the South Fork Bridge to the Police River Drive intersection. Fourth was the South Couplet. Fifth was the Hatley Way and Warbonnet intersection. Sixth was Mountain View and Troy Road. 7 was Steiner and White Avenue. And then the Llewellyn and 3rd Street intersection actually was identified as 8th and is recommended in the plan for potential delay until the future of that intersection is identified. There is some concept for the reconfiguration of 3rd and Llewellyn to improve sight distance and safety and operations of that intersection. If that's the case, then we should probably postpone that discussion for improvements until such time as that's been resolved and identified. Again, I think predominantly north and south were the areas that were felt that could have the greatest improvement. West and east were probably the 2 best current condition. And so that really is reflected in the prioritization that the steering committee is recommending. So the steering committee certainly recognizes that these improvements are identified in plan. As you look at the cost estimates, are not inexpensive. And so they probably exceed any realistic funding opportunity in the short term outside of some grant programs that certainly we'll continue to explore. One of the recommendations of the steering committee was to look at a self-performance model where the city would hire 2 full-time seasonal individuals that would work essentially approximately 6 months a year and would do tree and landscape installation in order to get some of the enhancements. A significant focus of the improvements are really street tree installations in a large number of locations. So there was an outline of a program including labor and materials of what something like that could look like. It was anticipated that the actual installations could probably be accomplished over a 3-year time period. So you can see that there are labor and material expenses that are carried through year 3 that run roughly $60,000 a year for that program. And then in year 4 and 5, it shifts down into kind of a maintenance mode where you would just be predominantly the labor for the ongoing landscape maintenance, vegetation and weed management control, and then some materials for plant mortality and change out in trees that die that you need to replace over time.
Well,
John, you want to?
just a question.
Okay.
You've got year 4 and 5 where you have reduced the materials significantly, but the annual labor is going to remain the same. In fact, it went up. Would that be from year 5 through 15, 20?
It was anticipated that that would be an ongoing activity, and it's after the installations of the corridors. There may be other areas, let's say potentially in the downtown area, where that labor could also be placed into a higher level of maintenance, street cleaning, other activities. So it was anticipated that additional labor expense would likely be an ongoing expense depending upon the maintenance needs that we saw. To be conservative, I was suggesting that those individuals would be responsible for long-term maintenance. It probably is likely that after the installations are done, they could do that, as well as maybe other additional activities with beautification and additional maintenance activities.
Bill, do you add more to your presentation you want to talk about?
Just a little bit, but I'm happy to answer a question. The steering committee also in its recommendations did identify and wish to prioritize the North Entryway project and to complete that project as a design build, bid and build project, not necessarily through the self-performance model. So we would develop a actual design that could be placed out to bid for construction and to help accelerate the installation in that location because they felt that was a high need, and then we can move into the self-performance model on the remaining locations. So just a recap of the expenses in the project so far. I have had some questions about that. As I mentioned before, the council authorized the $35,000 on the project, $10,000 in Phase 1, and up to $25,000 in Phase 2. Our actual expenses on the project were just under $14,200. We expended just over $2,000 for Phase 1 and approximately $12,000 for Phase 2. So that's how we ended up on the project based on the council's authorization. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Bill, this was on April of 2012. This became a Moscow City Council identified goal. They want, so we're almost 3 years into this thing. It looks like a well written report for the project. And one of the things, and you hit it once, and I'm going to hit it again because I highlighted it, and it's one of the things, and the comment that the committee made, it is understood that those who have lived in the community for a long period of time become accustomed to the community and often do not notice that which is more apparent to someone who has never been to Moscow, and I think that's very, very true. I think it's awful easy when we have our own backyard and we get a few extra weeds once in a while. It's easy just to mow them over, continue on, or whatever, or a fence that needs painted or whatever. So I think that's a very valid point that's easy for us to have happen to us. I'm going to go to Wayne because he had a question on one of the couplets somewhere.
Go back to your drawing, please, Bill, to the north entrance. Notice that we have recommendations all along the west side of Main down to Rodeo Drive, but then south of Rodeo Drive in this area and further south, there's no recommendations. Why was that?
There are recommendations for continued street tree installations working with private property owners all the way down through and in front of Rosars and actually all the way down to the North Couplet project, but it wasn't a identified individual focus project.
Okay.
One of the things, Bill, as I was going through the total of these 8 projects, and of course you guys had 6 different phases that you looked at, or 5 different phases earlier, running roughly $50,000 to $60,000 per phase for planting trees or vegetation or whatever. And I looked at all the other combined totals in here, which comes to about $1.8 million, which may or may not be accurate. Maybe have a contingency of 15 and 20% higher than that. So I mean, so you're really looking at $2 million. Could you go back to that suggested amount that you had for labor and items towards the end of your presentation? Wherever those were.
Almost there.
Yeah, those right there. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. Now, my question for you is this, is what projects in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5? I think that's a question I'd like to have you elaborate on.
It was anticipated that each of the project sites could be completed within a 3-year time period. So all 8 sites could be improved. Now, it's not going to be the full improvement. So you look at the decorative steel work on the handrails.
You're talking just about vegetation and...
You're talking about landscape material placement and street tree installations.
Okay.
But some of the there are some more expensive items that include the public art, the decorative handrails, the metalwork. That is not contemplated in the self-performance model. In that instance, we're anticipating that those would have to be possibly public art grants or other funding sources that we might be able to secure for those. But this was just primarily, and with the primary focus being weed and vegetation control, street tree installations, and some landscape enhancements. Those were things we felt that we could self-perform those tasks with this proposal.
And getting those things started now.
However, if the this is just a suggestion for the council for consideration.
If the council gives the direction, of course, I understand that.
Correct.
Well, I want to go to Walter. He was the chair of the steering committee.
I was just going to try to clarify your question, Mr. Mayor, and or elicit Bill's explanation to answer that. I believe what you're looking at is the landscape architect's cost estimate for the project that was developed. And as you said, I believe it approaches $2 million. I think, Bill, the mayor's question might have been, how'd you get from $2 million down to $150,000 for the 3 years installation? If you could elaborate on that.
It's just magic.
Well, I think actually Bill did a pretty good job of that because we talked about all the art and all the
It's not just
artistic
that. It's not just that, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's
things in addition to that.
Well, there certainly are some things that would. So there are a couple elements. One is we would not be paying a landscape architect to develop, biddable construction documents. These would be based upon the concept designs and somewhat designed in the field. All the landscape materials would be purchased directly by bulk and would be installed with their own labor. So, between those two items, there are some significant savings. There are some of the hardscape improvements that are not included in the budget that may have to be partnered up with the sidewalk program or may look at other opportunities to assist in some of those installations. And then the public art, the decorative steel, some of the more extensive improvement elements are not included, not contemplated. This would get us starting at a higher level of maintenance of the roadway corridors with some street tree installations, some landscape bed installation, and it's a smaller scale, but it was anticipated at the $1.8 million. That was not realistic that we would be able to fund that. Mm-hmm. So the next question is, well, what could we realistically do? What kind of program could we put together where we could actually get some improvements happening and begin to also partner with the private business community to help improve their frontages like we had done, for example, on the Highway 8, the Troy Road project in front of Napa Auto Parts and Pets People 2, that we worked on that landscape bed installation and street trees installation, and then they took over the maintenance of that. So we're really looking at what can we do to make a difference here.
Walter?
Mr. Mayor and Council, we believe as the committee and with staff that if we walked in here with a $2 million program, we would get wow, great work, took you a little long to get it done, and thank you very much. And we wouldn't see anything get started or accomplished. The idea that Bill has presented is Bill's idea. That's not to give him blame if it goes wrong, it's to give him credit when it goes right. He said there's got to be a way to do this that's realistically expensive. $150,000 is not chump change, it's real money. It's got to come from somewhere. And the challenge is going to be to staff to figure out how to, and the mayor, of how to work it into a proposed budget. But it is a start, and it's a way to improve the appearance perception of Moscow. Mr. Mayor, I would state that Moscow has a perception problem. We are perceived in the Boise area, in my opinion, as not being business friendly. We are perceived as not being Boise State University. We're just the land-grant university.
Well, we're still not Boise State University.
We are perceived as the tragedy that occurred, as you mentioned earlier, 10 days ago. This is an appearance problem that we're talking about tonight, and I think what's being proposed here is a way to start on that. When the university finds a way to attract potential students from South Idaho, Southeast Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and the parents finally say, okay, get a map, let's figure out where Moscow is, and we'll take you up there this Vandal Friday or whatever it happens to be. The committee felt very strongly that what those parents see as they first drive into town, and what the students see is important, and will help the university in their efforts to increase their enrollment. And as we've realized and come to realize, the university is the economic engine of Moscow. When the university enrollment drops, real estate drops. Downtown businesses that are on the edge have trouble hanging on. We need that enrollment to keep Moscow vibrant, and the committee and staff believe that this proposed project, in the fashion that Bill has laid out, is a way to start getting a handle on that.